In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this blanket ladder. So let's get started. So I began by leaning up the side pieces against the wall to try to determine what angle I needed at the base and at the wall. Now I am going to provide a link to the plans, so if you don't want to have to figure all this stuff out, there will be a link that you can purchase the plans for this video. It'll be down in the description. But I just set a board on the floor and got the leg exactly where I wanted it and traced a line so it would be parallel to the floor. Next, I went to the miter saw and I changed the angle to match the line I drew at the base. I made the cut, and now I'm ready to go and mark the other angle at the top where it's going to meet the wall. Now in my shop I have a deeper window frame that is untrimmed, so this worked out really good for marking how I wanted the angle to meet the wall. I just took a piece of tape and set it at the height above the floor that I wanted, and then what I'm just going to do is let that board extend into that window frame and trace where it meets the wall, therefore getting a pretty accurate angle. Now I didn't want the angle to come clear to the corner. I wanted a little bit of wood extending out from the wall, so that is why I left that space between the wall and the corner of the board. Next, I got out my jigsaw. I clamped that board down to my workbench and I cut the line that we just made so that it matches the wall nicely. After that, we just duplicated the cut onto the other side piece, marked it, got the jigsaw out, clamped the new board down, and made the cut. We did have to trim the end off a little bit because it was a little bit longer because I hadn't cut anything to length yet. Next, I got out my sander. I sanded everything to 120 grit. I did not go any further than that because I knew this was going to get painted. I was not worried about any burn marks or any blemishes that were visible. I just wanted to get everything smooth and even. So any of those saw marks you see on the boards, they are smoothed out. You can't feel that they're there. It was just a burn on the blade. This is ash, and it was not cutting the greatest on my table saw, which is why those burn marks appeared in the first place. I probably also need a new table saw blade, but that's for another day. And I decided to go to my router table and take the ladder rungs and the sides and just do a small roundover on them. And the main reason for this was for the ladder rungs, I just didn't want blankets to snag at all on these things. So I thought it'd be better just put a small roundover. And as for the sides, I just did it on the front edge, just to cut down that corner a little bit, not make it such a crisp, sharp corner, just in case someone were to bang their knee against it or, something like that. So this is kind of an optional step, but I thought it was important, so that's why we did it. Now the person I am making this for wanted this to have a piece of wood extending along the wall and out from the wall, essentially making it a freestanding blanket ladder. So that's what we're doing here, and I know that they're not always like that. So in the plans I am making and available to purchase, they will have plans for doing this both ways. So you could either have it extend up the wall and out from the wall to support it better, or you can just have the ladder leaning against the wall. Either way is fine. So what we're doing here is I'm going to drill pocket holes in the pieces that are on the floor and along the wall in order to attach them to the two sides that are coming up at an angle that'll hold the blanket rungs. I will also drill pocket holes in the rungs themselves. Now I'm making sure that all fasteners are hidden. So these pocket holes I'm making right now are going to be against the wall or along the floor so nobody can see them. And the ones I'm doing in the ladder rungs will be facing the wall so they won't be seen either. I feel it's very important when making anything out of wood. If you can hide your fasteners, it looks so much better. So I highly encourage you to do that anytime you're woodworking. You just get a lot nicer product. Nobody wants to see, especially pocket hole pockets for these screws. They don't look the greatest. Now you can buy plugs and plug those pocket holes and then sand them flush. Uh, Especially if you're painting, that it hides it pretty well. But if you're using hardwoods and you're going to stain, those plugs still show. So they're not always the best option. So I just encourage you, try to always hide your fasteners when you can. Next, I added a little bit of glue, and I decided to clamp this up along the wall so that I was sure to get that vertical piece that was going to be along the wall nice and straight. I didn't want it to kick out from the wall too far either direction. And so I just thought that would be the best way to do it. So I clamped it in place and then ran the screws in. Now, one thing about screws, when you buy pocket hole screws, you can buy coarse thread or fine thread. I did learn a lesson with this. I had some coarse thread I was just grabbing. I actually have a really big box of those. I use them a lot, but they work a lot better in plywood and pine than they do in ash, I found out. So I actually broke a few screws, and I had to remedy that by using the fine thread. And once I did that, they worked a lot better. Just keep that in mind. Make sure you're using the right kind of screw for the type of wood you're using. Next, I took the base and I did the same thing. Put a little bit of glue on it and screwed the base to the back, and then screwed the base to the leg coming down. Now, I did cut the front edge of that base piece where it was going to meet the front of the leg, the ladder part coming down from an angle. And I just cut it to match the angle that the piece was going to be. I thought it would look a little bit better than having a squared off corner there. The angle, I just traced it and then tried to match it on the miter saw. So I don't have a set angle for that. You're just going to have to see, because yours could vary a little bit if you're making one of these at home. Now, I am using a special pocket hole clamp. These come in really handy when attaching things together. It holds things in place nicely. Sometimes you can't use a normal clamp. This would be an instance where a normal clamp would be kind of difficult to get a nice clamp job where it's not going to move, especially with the angle being cut on the other end of the board. So I can put a link in the description for one of these, and I use it a lot. You just got to be careful, because if that clamp spins a little bit, sometimes it can bust that pocket out. So you just got to be careful, make sure it's nice and tight, and it doesn't, like, gravity doesn't pull the clamp down and bust that out. But I highly recommend getting some of those if you're going to be using pocket holes at all. In order to establish the height of each rung of the ladder, we just measured up from the floor. The customer wanted the first one to be 2 foot off the floor, and then 9 inches for each additional one above that. So I marked the 2 feet. Then I just got a level out and drew a level line across the board in order to get the mark, so that I had a good level mark the whole way across, and I could be consistent with both sides. So we did that. We then proceeded to measure up the 9 additional inches, do the same exact thing for the next one, and so on until we got to the top. And then we were ready to attach the ladder rungs to the sides. Next, I took a piece of scrap wood, and I am using this for aligning each rung so that the spacing off the front of the sides is equal. And I'm just going to clamp this flush to the face, and then I will align the ladder rung along with that piece, and then make sure the top corner of the rung matches my line, and we should be consistent. That would help me be consistent on both sides of the project as well, so that everything fits together nicely. So I wanted to show you exactly what I have going on here. Here's the overall look. I have not attached the left side yet. I do have marks where each rung needs to go. I'm using this piece right here to set the offset off the front, and that would be consistent with this other side, which is all connected now. So it was a little bit hard to handle because the two sides, they were falling, and it was just, I don't know. So I got a bunch of clamps out, clamped everything in place. This one is pretty darn close. You can see right there. See if I can. It's pretty close to where I want it to be. So what I'm going to do is probably attach this top one first, and then I should be able to flex these a little bit into place as I go up. So that's what I'm going to do now. And all it is shooting pocket hole screws in. I'm not going to bore you with that. We'll catch you here once it's done. Now I have encountered a little bit of an issue. The base is not staying a consistent distance apart, and that is due to it not being tied together from one side to the other until 2 foot off the ground. There's nothing holding it near the wall, nothing along the entire base. So what I have decided is to build in a little shelf type thing into the base so that it keeps that consistent distance apart. It'll also give you a nice place the person could set something on if they wanted to. So it serves a multiple purpose, and I think it'll work really well. And we're just going to basically come up with a consistent length, lay those in, and it'll hold it all together and should be more stable, a little bit less rickety, and just sit a lot nicer along the wall. So I decided to prime and paint everything prior to attaching these bottom slats. Thought it'd be a lot easier to get a nice coat of paint and less chance of drips forming down where the slats go and where they meet the base. So we're going to paint all these. It takes a few coats to get everything covered up, but once it gets covered up, we can attach the slats to the bottom. So I've established where I want the front to go. Now I got to figure out the spacing in between. Now the way we're going to do this is we're going to measure this gap, and then we're going to divide that gap, that number, by the number of spaces we need. So we need 1 in the back, 2 in between here, 3 in between here, and 4 in between here. So whatever that number is divided by 4 is what our spacing is going to be, and it should come out even. So what I measured was 7.5. We're going to divide that by 4. That comes out to 1 7/8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a space 1 7/8. Make a mark. Bring this to it. 1 7/8. 1 7/8, and it should all be even. So I have the spacing pretty good here. I like how it looks. I'm going to clamp the first one in place, tilt this thing back, get some screws in it, and then progress to each one after that. I will need to spread this apart because part of the reason I'm doing this is it's wider at the front and it kind of tapers in because there's nothing holding this together. So I'm gonna have to get a little bit of clamp and spread it out for some of these back ones, but we'll get that as we go here. We'll start by pre-drilling a hole. This is ash. It's very hard, and I don't want to break screws. I've marked my bit with some tape just to make sure I don't go through. I think 1 screw on each one should be sufficient, and I'm just gonna sink these in. And I'm just slightly countersinking them so that they don't hit the floor. Never know if So you never know if this is going to go on a hardwood floor. I don't want to scratch the floor or anything like that. So just a slight countersink and we are good to go. Now what I'm going to do, because I need to spread this, is I got this side flush. I got this side lined up where I want it. It's straight. So I'm going to put this in and then I'm going to spread this out, clamp it, and put the other one in. Now what I've done is I've reversed this quick grip clamp. I'm just gonna push it out until it gets where I want it to be. Position this one right where it needs to be here on my mark. I'm gonna clamp it in place. So now we're flush on the outside. We're also on the mark here. Still on the mark here. Good to go. Tilt it back down. Drill it in. So we completed the project. For this project, obviously I made a support that goes along the wall and along the floor. And typically I probably wouldn't do that for most blanket ladders. I don't know that it's always necessary, but the customer wanted it done like this, so that's how we did it. Thanks for watching. Check out these videos right here that you can see on the screen. They'll show you some other projects that we've done and some other woodworking tips so that you can become a better woodworker yourself. We'll catch you next time.